Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about a very important story, a developing story, and that is about the Indian allegations on Pakistan. It is not the first time that India has tried to malign Pakistan regarding this terrorism issue or infiltration issue for that matter. This time the Chief of Army Staff has practically threatened Pakistan and he has said that we'll take over, we'll have a hostile takeover. This is exactly the statement was. And in reaction, the Foreign Office spokesperson, Ms. Aisha Farooqi, very categorically mentioned, and they also in fact registered their complaint to the senior members of the Indian High Commission. And at the same time, when we talk about the Indian allegations, we all know that what exactly is the situation on the LOC. When you talk about the line of control or the working boundary for that matter, constant shelling by the Indian side. And this time it is not only through the machine guns or through the use of mortars, they are practically using the laser guided missile system. And that is actually targeting the Pakistani checkpoints and in certain areas, certain civilian areas. When you talk about the Indian occupied Kashmir, there are so many proofs that they are blowing up the houses of the Muslims there, their trade, their businesses, and that's how they're trying to put some sort of pressure on this indigenous movement, I would say, that has grown in the Indian occupied Kashmir and now gaining strength and gaining momentum with each passing day. There were reports that the freedom fighters attacked a convoy or rather it was basically an operation according to the Indian military in which one colonel, one major and 4 other Jawans were killed. So when they will be doing very open killing or when they'll be trigger happy, this is bound to happen. This is exactly what Pakistan has said, that this could trigger something and then Pakistan should not be blamed because this is totally homegrown indigenous movement of the Kashmiri people for the sake of freedom. Now, that is the most important part. On the other hand, when you talk about the DG ISPR, he has also condemned such allegations by the Indian side and especially by the Chief of Indian Army. Now, it seems that whenever something happens, for example, there was this issue again raised by the Indians regarding the election in Gilgit-Baltistan. Now, this is not their territory, though they have included this particular territory when they included the Pakistani Kashmir or the Azad Kashmir. And I used to even talk at that time that this is going to be a problem because they have added a sovereign area of Pakistan into their territory. So, this is something one should look into. Other than that, as we all know that the civilians are being targeted on this side, people are being killed on daily basis. We end up hearing that our Jawans are being martyred or are being targeted by the hostile Indian military, which is well over 1 million at the moment inside Kashmir only, just imagine. To talk about this, we'll be joined in by we have been joined by Air Vice Marshal retired Ikramullah Bhatti Saab, who's a senior defense analyst. Sir, Assalamu alaikum, Bhatti Saab, and thank you very much for taking out your time and talking to PTV World, sir. First of all, sir, your take on the statement issued by none other than the Indian Army Chief, sir.
Well, it's very unfortunate that a person of his seniority is making such an unfounded, such a nonsense statement. But then this is the Indian military, Indian government and the BJP that they want to continue to harp on this tune wherein they want to continue to blame Pakistan and coming up with absolutely absurd claims and blames in which they want to say that Pakistan is still maintaining those launching pads and there's still infiltration taking place from this side of the border. Whereas we have permanent military observers on both sides, and if India is willing, because Pakistan has always offered that those observers can go and visit the place and see for themselves. And we've also seen that last year when they stage managed that drama of the Pulwama attack and the attack on Balakot, we learned that they ended up dropping bombs on a place which was, which according to them had a training camp, whereas there was nothing of the sort over there. And of course, Pakistan did arrange a visit of foreign diplomats and even defense attaches just to see them, see that place and find out for themselves and confirm whether such a place existed over there or not, as claimed by the Indian side. And now that we find that not only the army chief of India, but also their CDS continues to make such frivolous and baseless allegations. And I think the purpose remains that they want to continue to blame Pakistan, continue to divert the attention of the world opinion and world media that whatever unrest that we are witnessing in Indian occupied Kashmir is, according to them, essentially caused by these people who have been infiltrating from Pakistan and they are not indigenous. Whereas that is not the case. For the last several years, we have found that after the Shahadat of Wani, we have seen that the Kashmiri's freedom struggle has taken a new turn, it's taken a new life, and which is now becoming a headache for the Indian side, and they are continuing to cover it up by blaming Pakistan all along that it is not an indigenous movement and these are the people who have come from Pakistan and they are not Kashmiris. And in order to sustain that rhetoric, in order to continue to remain focused on their narrative, and in order to make absolutely failed attempts at convincing the world media and the world opinion about their narrative, I think it is a continuation of the same that we have just got this statement from the Indian Army Chief. Ji.
AVM Saab, we've also been joined in by Ali Sarwar Naqvi Saab, Senior Ambassador, Senior Diplomat. And I would like to put this question to him regarding the allegations and what should be the diplomatic way. Ali Sarwar Naqvi Saab, first of all, thank you very much for taking out your time and talking to PTV World now. Please do tell us about one important area. You know, whenever we hear that Mr. XYZ or some senior official or maybe the Deputy High Commissioner or the High Commissioner has been summoned in the Foreign Office and then he has been told what is going on. Now, so when you look at the Indian side, they have been saying that the Pakistani military has been, in fact, firing so that the infiltration can take place. This is exactly what their allegation is in certain areas. But knowing the border, knowing the kind of arrangements by the Indians, it is absolutely impossible to go through that area, and especially when you are having so many fences, so many walls, so many electric setups there, so, and plus on top military's presence and lights and everything. So, yeah. I mean, does it make sense to you?
Well, no, not at all. This is an old excuse which has become so cliched and so unbelievable that they should give up making these kind of allegations, but unfortunately they are caught in their old habits. I mean, you're quite right. The border is well monitored with surveillance, with electrical wiring, etc., especially on the line of control and the areas where they allege such activities have taken place. Pakistan has no motivation or interest in infiltrating people there because of the fact that the movement in Kashmir is full-blown insurgency, is going on. The entire youth is alienated, as vouched by Indian reports and also, like Yashwant Sinha's report, then the UN High Commissioner's report, an international agency. So the point is that this is a totally baseless and maligned, a kind of ill-intentioned position that the Indians have taken and the Army Chief has taken. So I think it was quite right for the DG ISPR to completely blow away this whole canard and say that this was totally baseless allegation. The Indian High Commissioner, yes, the Deputy High Commissioner or the acting head of mission is summoned because we want to place on record that the allegations have been made and firing has been indulged in, because then they fire on our side, and our side is fully populated, so there are casualties that occur. So this is to place on record our strong protest at this kind of irresponsible behavior by a neighboring state. And I think this is very important to do this, because no matter how often we have to do it, we must always place on record every day, every time.
Because this is happening on almost daily basis, Naqvi Saab. Now, another point is, when you look at the Indian forces, I mean, earlier we used to hear that they are using heavy machine gun or mortars for that matter, but this time they have deployed some serious weaponry there, using some guided missiles also to target the Pakistani checkpoints, and in certain cases, certain houses of Muslims living on this side. Forget about what is going on in the Indian occupied Kashmir, we all know. But this hostile kind of an attitude, sir, and such aggressive statements by the Indian military chief, what is that supposed to mean, sir? Is there something brewing in their mind, or what exactly is happening?
Well, they better not they better not have the intention of doing anything nefarious, because they will get a bloody nose, if nothing else. I think they are basically doing it for domestic consumption, as far as I can make out, because they can show to their own domestic audience, which is fed up with the government on many accounts, and most immediate, the coronavirus lockdown. Because the public is not, happy about it. So they want to create the impression in the public mind and on their media, especially the TV, electronic media, that the government is dealing with a very bad neighbor and who is causing all kinds of provocations, etc. There is not a canard. It's a lie, and it's not going to work, because the truth of the matter, if at all there had been infiltration, that would have come out. The Indians are just flogging an old horse for nothing that's worthwhile, and it's very unfortunate.
All right. AVM Bhatti Saab, now, there are the two areas now. Here, sir, first of all, when you talk about the violations, when you talk about the weaponry being used, whether the civilians are being targeted or the military checkpoints are being targeted. Now, sir, this has been happening on almost a daily basis. They've got some great equipment. I'm sure the kind of money India is spending on the defense, that tells us the story. Now, sir, in this particular case, if your military checkpoints are being targeted on regular basis, violations are taking place, LOC has become a very hot spot, I would say, sir, then what should Pakistan do? Just by issuing statements from the ISPR or by the Foreign Office, are they enough, or you think another step should be taken in accordance with this whole issue, sir?
Well, you see, in Indian held Kashmir, we know that for every 10 Kashmiris, there is an Indian soldier, and nearly 1 million Indian troops are deployed over there. And Indian government not only has to justify to its own people why have they militarized this territory so much, plus they also have to convince the world also and justify why such a large amount of military, wide number of military presence is there in that area. So to be able to justify, they have to have such skirmishes going on, such shootouts, such violations, so that they can justify that these are the infiltrations that are taking place, and hence we have to, the Indian side have to respond, and hence they have a large number of forces over there. Now, if they increase the number of weapons, or increase the or change the weapon type of weapons which are more lethal, much bigger, and that of course ups the ante. And if the number of casualties in Pakistan side start to happen, and there will be a threshold which will be crossed, and then it will not be tolerable any longer for Pakistan. Not that any single life is tolerable. Not a single life is tolerable in terms of loss of life. So I think Pakistan side does retaliate for every violation, and we do end up causing casualties on their side as well. And I think as long as that goes on, our purpose, our objective must be that we should give a befitting response, a punishing response, so that the Indians are deterred from repeating whatever they're doing. And that is in one manner, that is in one way that we can deter them from continuing this exercise. The second, of course, is that we can continue to diplomatically, raise our protest. And thirdly, of course, we can raise the level to international bodies. Either we ask the military observer group to come and witness, or we raise it to the UNO that such incidents are continuing and that they ought to be checked. And in the meantime, of course, we know that because of the coronavirus, there is already a statement by the UN Secretary General that all military hostile actions going on in the world today must stop, and the world must unite its effort to fight against this pandemic. And unfortunately, the Indian side has just not listened to it. They just
peace seems to be prevailing in so many areas where the war-like situation is, whether you talk about Yemen or you talk about Afghanistan for that matter, or Syria. But when it comes to Kashmir, sir, now there is another point, because recently we got to know that a colonel, his name was, if I'm not wrong, Ashutosh, Colonel Ashutosh from the 21st regiment stationed in Kashmir, along with the major and a few Jawans. They were killed in an ambush. They were attacking. Now my point is, sir, that blame has also been put on Pakistan. And the Indian military and their spokesperson, they've been saying that Pakistan is letting these people enter into India in the cover of fire. Now, this is the basic allegation. But, sir, I had put this question to Naqvi Saab also, and he said this is absolutely impossible. So, sir, when they say that they will provide some proof, what proof are they going to provide, sir? Because earlier they were unable to provide any proof regarding the dogfight that took place on the 27th of February last year, or even prior to that, the so-called attack on the Pakistani area, sir.
Well, you see, they can always produce some fake ID cards, some fake passports belonging to Pakistan, and then showing it on media that, look, this is what we discovered, and these are the people who are not Kashmiri, but they are Pakistani. Well, you see, these days, first of all, it is not too difficult to come up with such like documents. Secondly, if at all there was to be any infiltrator, would he carry his ID paper with him all the way to India so that he gets identified as such? So, I don't think they could come up with any such proof. More so when Pakistan has offered that the international observers to be brought to the area, to the scene, and let them decide for themselves if there was an infiltration taking place, or who are these people. And as Naqvi Saab just said, that see, there is such a strong arrangement at the border where infiltration is almost impossible in the presence of such a large army. I mean, they've got nearly 900,000 troops. And it is a failure on the part of the Indian military if, despite such a huge presence, they are letting infiltrations happen. And that too under the garb of crossfire. And well, you see, I mean, they are self-contradictory and self-defeating arguments that they're coming up with, or the allegation that they're coming up with. And the fact remains that they have to justify their presence in Kashmir. And they have to tell the domestic audience as well as the international audience that these are not Kashmiris, because that will weaken their narrative, they weaken their case. So they have to continue to harp on this point that these are Pakistani infiltrators. And their presence gets justified by that crossfire that happens over there on their side. And of course, they can always continue to blame that all those people who are killed in the exchange of fire within IHK, they're Pakistani infiltrators. Whereas they're all honest to goodness, bona fide Kashmiri locals. And the struggle for the last several years is totally indigenous. And they themselves have claimed it, they've themselves owned it, and yet just to find an excuse, just to justify their position, the Indians continue to harp on this tune that these are infiltrators from Pakistan, and Pakistan is continuing to infiltrate these people from across the LOC, and they want to divert the attention of the world, and of course satisfy their own people that, look, the struggle in Kashmir is not indigenous, it is not Kashmiri people, these are the Pakistanis over there. So they get a political point over there for their own people, and they continue to feed the people across the board.
All right. Ali Sarwan Naqvi Saab, now, because they are the main important points. Now, when you hear a statement by the Indians regarding the election in Gilgit-Baltistan that's due in a few months' time, most likely after this bad episode of Corona. Now, sir, their allegation on the elections of Gilgit-Baltistan, and on top, interestingly, if you remember when they added the Pakistani Kashmir or the Azad Kashmir in their map, they also, by the way, included Gilgit-Baltistan. What is that supposed to mean, sir? How do you look at it?
Yeah, I will come to that in a minute. But about the Kashmir, sort of this allegation of infiltration and they're fighting, why they're fighting on our side, I think going by what the Secretary General of the UN said, that all conflicts should be suspended at this very trying time of the coronavirus, I think we should this time raise the level. And instead of just calling the Deputy High Commissioner to the Foreign Office, which we have been doing, I think we should ask our permanent representative in New York to go to the Secretary General and say that right after your call for all countries to desist from any conflict situations, there has been this incident, and the Indians are continuing provoking Pakistan, and the UN military observers group should be immediately activated. At least we should place on record our demand that they must be immediately activated to investigate into this issue and to let the UN know what his findings are. So this, I think, should be done at this juncture. Secondly, about the Gilgit-Baltistan elections, you see, it's best to ignore that because they have been raising a UN cry about their claims to Kashmir and on the Pakistani side. But this is ridiculous, and just as they carry on doing their elections and so-called elections and their activities in their part of occupied Kashmir, we don't owe them any explanation, and we don't need to indulge into any discussion on this subject. So I think we should just carry on our program of elections in JB and ignore entirely what the Indians have been saying.
Do you believe that at some stage or at any stage, maybe after a month, maybe once the corona issue is over, or maybe in the near future, false flag operations by the Indian side, because this is what they do whenever something erupts of this magnitude?
Yeah, quite possible, very much possible. I think the Prime Minister in the past has been alerting the world, because Pakistan has taken a position a number of times that the Indians might indulge in a false flag operation. This government has highlighted that a number of times. So I think this should again be brought out, and Prime Minister may find it appropriate at some juncture to alert the world on this.
All right. Now, AVM Saab, Pakistan, when you talk about Pakistan, sir, the other day there were reports from Iran that a lot of Afghanis, they were trying to, Afghan people were trying to come towards the Iranian side, and the guards were there and they forced them to jump in the river and they were drowned. This was a story. So problem on that side. You talk about Afghanistan, we exactly do not know who the person is who's calling the shots, whether it's the US high-ups or it's Ashraf Ghani or it's Abdullah. There's a turmoil there though. Ceasefire seems to be in place, but a lot is still happening as we speak. You talk about Kashmir, sir, that is known as a nuclear flashpoint between these two rival states, Pakistan and India. And at the same time, when we look at this huge area, sir, that is Kashmir, more than 1 crore people living there, and now it seems that that is the core issue. Maybe Afghanistan is not. Is it correct, sir?
Well, in the region, of course, somehow the entire world considers Kashmir to be a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan, and somehow the world doesn't feel the heat of this issue. Uh, and they're more focused on Afghanistan because we see that there was a coalition of nearly 40 countries who had committed their troops to go there and fight the Taliban and then or Al Qaeda. And now that we see peace returning over there, but there's still a lot to happen. There's a lot of ground to be covered, and the fact remains that even if the Americans withdraw, the presence of IS will remain there for a while till, of course, the regional countries and the international organization like UNO continues to provide support to whichever government that eventually takes place in Kabul to fight this organization, IS. But the fact is that this over 70 years old issue between India and Pakistan is simmering, and now it has a new dimension of a nuclear capability between the two countries. And we have already had that near miss in the shape of Pulwama and Balakot operation, in which, of course, the Americans had to intervene so that it doesn't get escalated. But what we can say is that as long as this issue is not resolved, the tension between the two nuclear rivals is going to persist. And the world must understand that unless they take interest, they do intervene, this danger of escalation between these two countries will remain. And we've seen that the Indians did attempt this surgical strike in February last year. And as you just asked, that the fear of another false flag operation resulting into a similar adventure by India does exist, and our Prime Minister has been cautioning the world about it. My take on that is that as long as the Indians are convinced that they are going to get a bloody nose, they're not going to attempt it. And they got that lesson last year. But the fact remains that having experienced that episode of last year, I'm sure the Indians have learned their lesson, and they do realize that for the moment they are not in a position to undertake any such adventure
That's
again.
what we believe,
But
that they've learned their lesson. But don't you think now the hostile attitude was there, is there, and it is going to remain there by the Indians? Now I'll just put another question here, sir. Now, when you talk about the US role, we do understand that. I remember Mr. Donald Trump was in Far East having negotiations with Mr. Kim Jong-un, and well, they were not that fruitful. But the point was that even at that time, Mr. Pompeo was saying that we were more concerned about the Pakistan-India conflict and the escalating situation here. So that means that the American interest is there, and obviously the Americans had intervened to put an end to this sort of a conflict. But sir, at the end of the day, I'll also quote Cameron Munter. He was in Pakistan attending a seminar, a very important one, and I ended up interviewing him. And he said that the American establishment, it doesn't really matter to them whether Pakistan and India, they are into a war-like situation or not. So deep down, when you look at the American establishment, sir, maybe on the surface, I mean, it's a different ball game. But deep down, sir, I mean, what difference will it make to them if Pakistan and India, you know, end up having a war over a certain piece of land, over Kashmir or Gilgit-Baltistan or XYZ areas for that matter, sir?
Well, as long as Pakistan and India both did not have nuclear weapons, probably it would not have mattered to the Americans. I mean, like we fought 65 war, we fought 71 war, and it was all over. But with the nuclear capability, there's a threshold that Pakistan has, and if that is threatened or violated, of course, the war can turn into next dimension, which is going to be not just catastrophic for the two countries, not for the region, but for the world. And being the sole superpower at the time, for the time being at least, it becomes America's responsibility to ensure that there is peace, order, and tranquility in the world, and no such devastation takes place at such a monumental scale. And I think that was the reason that the American president intervened last time after the Balakot episode. And that means that he is fully aware of his position, his responsibility, and his commitment to the world. And while Mr. Munter may have said, but I think it must be in the domain of conventional war only. And they cannot shy away from this responsibility that they have, being being sole superpower, to ensure that there is no such devastation that takes place. Because if that exchange does happen between the two countries, then it definitely is going to hurt, if not America directly, but most definitely its very close interests. So I think the Americans will most definitely intervene the moment they realize that the two countries are nearing the threshold of jumping into the next stage of war. And as far as Indians are concerned, I think as long as they continue to believe that they are not in a position to launch another Balakot type of operation, they will not do so. And they have learned that last year, and we know that for the,
I'll get back to
last
this
year,
point, sir, because this is something very important. Whether they have learned or they have not, their threats are still there, their aggression still exists, and at the same time, when you say that when it comes to the capability of any military or air force or navy for that matter, that takes time. But when you talk about the intention of the enemy, that can change overnight. We'll talk about that. Plus also, what if the entire globe is going through a recession or a depression maybe after this corona? What sort of an effect it is going to have on Pakistan and India, and especially Kashmir? We'll take a short break here. After the break, we'll return and we'll continue our discussion. Welcome back after the break. Now, talking to AVM Bhatti Saab. AVM Saab, now there is another point that is also important and it should be discussed. That is about the silence of the global powers. We did hear Trump saying that he can sort of intervene, he can, negotiate, he can be a moderator, he can be a person who can look after the affair, keeping both the sides with him. And now the point is that even now, when we hear the Prime Minister of India saying that, well, he never approached me during the summit in Japan maybe, and though the Trump administration also claimed, Trump himself said that Narendra Modi, approached him and said that, we are ready to talk about the Kashmir issue and all with Pakistan. But later on, he just, backed out from his statement. And secondly, when we talk about countries like China for that matter, or Russia, let's keep USA aside for a moment. So we need to have a direct supporting statement. The only statements, yes, China has supported Pakistan, Turkey has supported Pakistan, Malaysia has supported Pakistan, but we need some solid support from global players like UK, like France for that matter, Russia. Your take, sir. Germany.
Well, you see, international relations are governed by primarily interests that every nation has with the other nation. And today we know that India is one of the largest buyers of military ammunition, military equipment, which is the most profitable business these days. And when India decides to buy several $billion worth of equipment from Russia, several $billion worth of equipment from France, from UK, And of course, it has very serious interests with the US and vice versa. So it is very difficult to expect that these countries will come up with policy guidelines for India which are contrary to Indian narrative or Indian policies. And as long as these interests prevail, they continue to exist, we should not anticipate or foresee any such possibility. Uh, However, the only ray of hope that remains are the international institutions such as the UN and, of course, global public opinion. And that will be affected only when the world cannot tolerate, the global public opinion cannot tolerate the atrocities that the Indian government inflicts on the Kashmiris, or the world peace starts to get endangered. Then, of course, I think not just the UN, but all these countries that are listed would be, would become alive to the problem and would like to play their role so that peace returns to this area and the threat is warded off. But again, I think their interest or their effort would be as long as the peace returns, but not to solving the Kashmir issue. Because the fact remains, as long as they have their interests with India, they would not like to ruffle its feathers, and they would not like to displease it. So I think we should not expect anything from the Americans or from the Russians or from the French or the UK. It's only the Chinese who have no such interest, although they have around $100 billion worth of trade, but the overall trade volume of China is such in which their trade with India is not so important. Hence, they can afford to make such statements. But the fact remains that they are
we've also been joined in
trusted
by Saima Aman Sayal. She's a foreign affairs expert. And I would like to put this question to her, like post-COVID scenario, let's put it this way. A lot is going to change, the trade agreements, the FTAs, the PTAs, the amount of trade. AVM Sab just mentioned that the Indians and the Chinese, they're having a trade of almost $100 billion. The US and the Indian, they want to take it up to $500 billion. But when it comes to USA, remember one thing, that Trump is a very, very smart cookie, very tough one as well when it comes to negotiations, the way he's handled the Chinese. And he's not happy with the Indians. I mean, he was able to sell some products, military equipment worth about $3.5 billion on his recent visit. But he wasn't satisfied, and he really wants that the Indians should import a lot, whereas they are looking for the transfer of technology and so on and so forth. Do you believe that in the coming months or the coming year, or maybe 2021 onwards, when this COVID issue is taken care of, things would change, the narratives would change, the exchange of goods and ideas and products would also change? There's going to be a different world altogether. Your take, Saima.
Yes, thank you, Faisal, for having me. I think post-COVID, a lot has changed in the world already, but for regions like South Asia, where the traditional security threat remains from aggressive powers like India, what it has done is that it has added a non-traditional security threat to the already matrix that was available there. That's my first point, because I think it's important to take it into consideration. But I'd like to continue where AVN Saab was talking about the international response and about China and the other world powers. I think in the post-COVID world, China has emerged, and there's a lot of analysis that's been done in the international think tanks and media. You might have observed it, which are saying that, China is now emerging as a global power. It has taken that leadership vacuum that was created by the United States. So we should not belittle the efforts that China has made within the United Nations Security Council. Although the sessions were closed door, but China did take the Kashmir issue to the United Nations Security Council. And let us also think about the fact that China is now a party to the dispute, because Aksai Chin, when the Union territories were made, there were 3 of them. So, China is now part of this dispute, so it has a stake in it. So it will like to keep the issue being considered at the high forums like the United Nations. I'd also like to bring to your attention this United Nations Human Rights Commission, where Pakistan not only has brought up this issue, but the High Commissioner's report has repeatedly been asserting the fact India is doing these atrocities and human rights violations inside the the disputed Kashmir Valley. And also beyond that, not just Trump, it is this the new report, you might have seen it, the U.S. Religious Freedom Body. It has tagged India as a country of particular concern. Now, this is a new thing, and there were three of the members which wanted to give separate statements, which were then appendicized with it. But it clearly states that the religious minorities in India are made subject to violent attacks, killings, and those that are responsible for the attacks are rarely held accountable. Now, this is unprecedented. It was also categorically mentioned that there is a rise in political influence of extremist nationalist organizations which are promoting the Hinduization of the culture. Now, this is also unprecedented. And the report is clearly urging, and this is where I'd like to draw your attention to another important point as well, but this report clearly urges that the BJP leadership, the US should urge the BJP leadership that it should denounce the RSS militancy, which is supporting the violence. And it further urges India that it should allow the officials from foreign government agencies concerned with human rights to have access to go and see in India. And if you recall a statement that was made by DG ISPR yesterday, and he said that, India has been making these baseless claims against Pakistan. If it has, any proof, these are all superfluous claims. If it has any proof, it should give satellite imagery. It should reveal the location of the launch pads that it's talking about. So what the Indian BJP leadership is doing is, there's this the extremism, the fascism towards which it's speedily moving, it's going to engulf it. And so it's trying to divert attention like it did before in the surgical strike drama that it created, like in the Pulwama Balakot episode, in which it said that it was a preemptive strike, and later on the international media came in and stated that there was nothing of the sort that was happening on ground.
All right. Now, Saima, also a quick comment on this point. For example, the kind of the statements that are being issued by the Indian Army chief, on top of that, the hostile attitude they have towards Pakistan, very aggressive kind of word exchange on top. Now, my point is that what is the probability of, because I put this question to AVM Saab also, and he said that if something happens, there's going to be a fitting response from the Pakistani side, and this is what we have witnessed earlier about a year and a few months ago. What happened in Balakot, right after that, there was a strike inside India by the Pakistan Air Force, just telling them that, see, if you'll do this, this is going to be the reaction. What if something similar happens at a larger scale, maybe in some other area, in the name of false, whether you call it false flag operation or the Indians may call it whatever, at the end of the day, do you expect a similar reaction from Pakistan at a higher level?
I would like to,
and what could be the repercussions for that?
I think what Pulwama Balakot did was, it was just a trailer of what might come in the future for the region, and the world needs to pay attention very seriously. What happened in Pulwama Balakot, Pakistan's leadership handled the issue very responsibly, and the de-escalation measure was when we handed back the pilot to the Indians. This is not the playbook for the future. So in the future, and this statement has been made by Pakistan's advisor to the National Command Authority, General Khalid Kidwai, and he stated that Pakistan's response against the Indian aggression would be a quid pro quo plus, which means that if they want to go down the route of fighting with Pakistan, will respond one step up. Because, Pakistan's policy has been of restraint and responsibility, but Indian provocations, which are totally unnecessary, are trying to divert the attention from whatever is happening inside of its own territory. It's state terrorism against their own people. So, the new template that is going to happen is that Pakistan is going to respond and respond hard back, but at a time and place of its choosing, like we did before. But, the international community has a very important role to play here. And, the DG ISPR talked about it. The international media has been covering this issue for the whole year, that there is this escalation dynamic here, which has been overplayed negatively by the hostile BJP leadership. And hence there is this attention that needs to be given to the issue. Irrespective of whatever is happening in the COVID domain, this remains to be an issue which needs attention. I'd like to bring your attention to this very interesting, rather a very absurd statement that came from the 15 Corps commander I think it was in April, where he stated that in an interview to BBC that Pakistan had been infiltrating people with COVID into India
Yeah, that's
and
also
Indian
what they
occupied
said.
Kashmir.
Imagine. So, well, I think they also need to get themselves treated. The Indian Army chief definitely needs to go to a psychiatrist and get himself checked.
Yes. The point I'm trying to get at is that there is this infiltration of this extremist mindset that's going to the top tier in the Indian military as well as the civilian leadership.
And Saima, there was a time when the Indian military, we all used to think that they are under no influence from the civil governments. I mean, obviously there's a certain influence, but currently it seems that whether you talk about the Supreme Court, you talk about the current government of BJP, or you talk about the military, Navy or Air Force, they are all merged and they are looking in the same direction and they are at the same page. Now, that is something to ponder upon. But anyway, Saima, thank you very much for your participation. AVM Saab, was a pleasure having you. And thank you very much, Ali Sarwar Naqvi Saab, for your participation as well. And that's all we have for this. I'll see you again at 8 tomorrow. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.